Dear friends, welcome to a Short Encounters interview. I'm so pleased to have with me Mr. Doug Roland, who was kind enough to accept my invitation to answer a few questions for us regarding his interesting work or works. But who is Doug Roland? Well, for the world of cinema, Doug Roland is the writer and director of some particularly amazing films, including Feeling Through, which was nominated for the 2021 Academy Award for Best Live Action Short Film. That's right, it was nominated for an Oscar, which is pretty awesome, I think. And while the film did not win the Golden Statue, it had the privilege to win the 2021 Best Short Film Award here at our own little film festival, Short Encounters. So congratulations for that, Doug, because we had over 800 submissions from all over the world. So I think it was a big deal for us. It was anyway. Again, thank you for accepting my invitation. It's an honor, to be honest. And we will proceed with our first question, which is always we ask the creator if he wishes to say a few things about himself, your background. What was the defining moment that made you decide to become a film director? Was there such a moment, or it was something that it felt natural?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. It was one of those things where there's no well, actually there is a pretty decent story behind it now that I think of it. But it starts pretty average. I mean, like a lot of kids growing up, I loved going to the movies. I grew up in New York City, so I also would go to plays with my parents, and I loved but I particularly loved movies. I just loved the experience, the lights going down and just being transported into another world like so many other people. But it definitely never, if being an actual like filmmaker, doing like having a career in film felt very far away from me. It wasn't really something that was on my radar. But I did have a moment in high school that I didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but I think had a pretty big impact on that. I actually went to high school with one of Steven Spielberg's sons, well, his son. I guess he has
Amazing.
multiple kids, right? I think so. But anyway, I went to school with his son, Max, and who I didn't know very well, but I did have one class with. And Max was very quiet. He always sat in the back of the room. He never said anything. And then one day he raised his hand and he was like, "Hey, my dad's shooting a movie in New York, and he was wondering if our class wanted to go and visit set." And the teacher was like, "Yeah," like obvious.
What was the movie?
Catch Me If You Can.
Okay.
So we spent like a whole day going to the set of Catch Me If You Can, and of course, because we were with Mr. Spielberg's son, we were given VIP treatment and like walked straight up to the front of the set, and Spielberg hung out with us all day. And we got to wander around the set. I actually got in trouble a little bit because I was
Okay.
trying to impress my friend, and I was sitting in one of the producers' chairs, who actually he gave me a hard time, and then he was just pulling my leg. But it was such an amazing experience to just see what a film set was. That was the first time I'd ever been on a film set, to see what it was. And of course, like a Spielberg set's very different than most film sets. The scope of it, I mean, they blocked off like 8 square blocks, and just like it was like a whole village of people. But it was still really cool to see the nuts and bolts of it, to see Tom Hanks shooting a bunch of his scenes and then talking to Steven Spielberg afterward. And just to kind of really tangibly see it was a big moment. And then in college, I didn't really know what I was going to do, and I realized I could take I could take classes on film and get college credit for it. So I'm like, that sounds fun. That sounds like a fun way to get college credit. And then I quickly realized that's what I wanted to study in college. And then, ever since then, I've just been trying to find my way in to be able to continue to do it.
That's amazing. Did you have the chance to meet with Tom Hanks during the shootings? No.
Yeah, we did. He spoke to us, and he was really awesome. And I'll never forget this one moment, because it was, one of the kids, when we were doing like a Q&A with him, and it was a really small class. There were just like 12 of us. So it was like a really intimate class experience. And at one point, one of the students ask, "Do you like what you do?" And I remember thinking, that's such a dumb question. Like, why do you? He probably gets asked that all the time. It's such a basic question. But what stood out to me is like, even though he's probably been asked that like a million times, he like really took it and he's like, "Do I like what I do?" And he was like really checking in with himself. And then he went on this like, he's like, "I love what I do. It's like such a gift to be able to show up here, work with these people, do this job." And I just like remember being impacted by his like really authentic response to what felt like a really basic question.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that our audience would really like to know about your Oscar experience. I mean, how did it feel when you first realized, when you found out that your film was nominated for an Academy Award?
Well, it's funny because they're you can actually see how I felt because we recorded it, because they actually ask you to record your
Yes, I know.
reaction. Um, so of course there's some reaction videos out there that are reaction videos of disappointment as well. But yeah, we were elated. You know, it was such a joyous moment to find out that we had been nominated. And you know, of course, like any filmmaker or anyone in the film industry, you know, the Academy Awards is kind of if you're talking about like recognition, the Academy Awards is right up there with anything you can be recognized with. So it's a great honor, and it was something that you know, I almost didn't submit to the Oscars, let alone think I was going to get nominated. I didn't know. I didn't really know what the process was like, and through a very serendipitous turn of events, I had a couple people encourage me, like really at the 11th hour, to submit the film. I was uploading. There's a process when you're submitting. You have to upload a lot of assets, and I was literally uploading assets till like, you know, hours before the deadline. Like I was like that close.
There wasn't like from an Oscar qualifying festival.
But you still have to submit no matter what.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, you
Okay.
have to like go through the submission. There's a submission portal, and you have to go through that submission process and upload all the assets they ask for, and all that. So it is something where, regardless, like everyone has to go through that submission process to put all the assets on the portal. So yeah, but it was amazing to be recognized in that way. And you know, we were nominated during that one really weird COVID year, so it was a very, very small ceremony, not at the usual location. They did it at the Union Station, which is the
Yes, yes, I remember.
in Los Angeles. But it was a really special experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, filling through, we can of course describe the film for our viewers or provide some basic information, but it is always different where the creator talks about his work. It's more meaningful. So, I would like you to tell us a few things about you know, about the work. Where did the shootings take place? How long did they last? You know, things like that.
Sure. Well, we shot the film in New York City, primarily in half of it not half of it, maybe most of it in Brooklyn, and the rest in Lower Manhattan. We shot it over 4 nights, and it was, you know, we shot during the winter, so it's pretty much all exterior. So it got quite cold while we were shooting it. But yeah, it was you know, it was something where, you know, I think one of the notable things is that we had an actor who was deafblind, which was a film first to have an actor who's deafblind in a lead role, Robert Tarango. It was his first acting experience, so it was really, I've worked with like non-actors before, so that wasn't a first for me. But of course, like having different way of approaching it, given the communication methods that we employed to make the film, you know, to make it.
We will discuss about this later in the interview. I have some questions because I would like to know about the process
For
you
sure,
used.
sure.
Would you like to tell us a few things about the story?
Um, like what the film's about, you mean?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, the film, well, it was inspired by actually a real encounter I had. The about, I guess, 11, is it 11 years ago now? I'm trying to
Kind of
remember.
it happened to you, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, 11 years. I guess it was about 11 years ago. might have been 12. I'm losing track of the years during these COVID years. But I many years ago, when I was coming home late one night, I encountered a man who was deafblind in a very similar fashion to how you see in the film. And though the film is fictional, it's not meant to be like a one-to-one representation of that moment. It was inspired by that encounter. And the film is really, in this case, the film's different because the central character is very different than me, but the central character is a young man who's, we don't get the full scope of what's going on with him, but we know that he's in a tough position and doesn't have anywhere to stay that night, and that's why he's out really late and encounters this man who's deafblind, who's just in need of some assistance to get to his bus stop. And they end up sharing a good portion of an evening together. And though initially it's a distraction and an annoyance to the character Tariq, who's trying to figure out where he's going to sleep, it ends up being this deeply beneficial and deeply mutually reciprocal relationship slice of life moment that they have with each other.
Okay. I have to ask that one of your executive producers is Marley Matlen. Okay, we know her from her breathtaking performance in the amazing and unforgettable movie Children of Lesser God. I think it was released on 1986, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right.
For which she won the Oscar Award for Best Leading Actress. And of course, we know her from her amazing performance in Coda. Last year's the film won 3 Academy Awards: one for Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor, I think. Tell us your experience, working with Miss Matlen.
Yeah, it was very serendipitous getting her on board to support the film and the exhibition and of the film. Marley is someone that I've definitely had admired from afar prior to connecting with her. I've been a fan of her work for a long time, but also been really an admirer of how she's used her platform as a deaf person in Hollywood to really shine a light on people with disabilities in filmmaking and to get more opportunities for people with disabilities. And that's why she was such a great fit to be a part of this film, because the film is one thing, the story, and we've been really grateful that so many people have responded to the story, but we've also used the film to raise awareness for the deafblind community, and to also, more than raise awareness, have it be an opportunity to create platforms for people within the community to be able to share their experiences. And Marley was, the energy and the experience that Marley brought in that capacity was just a really great way to continue to propel the film and everything around it forward. And she's just a great person too, aside from the film. She's just a great person who's, a mother of 4 and just like a down to earth, like really great individual.
You said a mother of 4. You recently became a dad.
Yeah.
A daddy.
Yeah, I have a 5-week-old daughter who has been a joy and also leaves me tired. You probably find extra bags under my eyes during this interview.
So you're happy. You're flying high.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And so just all the things that people say about having a newborn turn out to really all be true, but one of which being that they're just so adorable and amazing.
That's wonderful. Okay, thoughts evoke more than their subject. That's the topic of the next question. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but your film starts with one traveling movement. It's Derek outside something like a convenience store, something like that. And this is a Steadicam, apparently, you use there. But until the end of the film, you make use of handheld camera. Okay, would you like to tell us why you made this choice? which is the same in Jada, the other short film. You use this. Why you make this choice?
Yeah, sure.
Is it a stylistic choice? Is it for practical reasons?
Both.
Both.
One of the things I think that's one of the interesting things about filmmaking is like this concoction between the story and the images that starts to evoke in the director's mind, and then the resources too that one has, right? And this kind of marriage between those and figuring out how you're going to best use your resources and to also first and foremost support the story. For me, there's like there was a verite aspect. If we could feel like we were really dropping in on just watching these two people, these two characters come together, feel like we were a fly in the wall, felt like it was something that was going to really support this kind of story, and therefore practically too, it was going to be, logistically easier for us to go handheld. Those things seem to really both work together to support the story and the resources that we had. So that was really how that choice came about. But this wasn't about capturing, I think there's like, I didn't necessarily analyze it to this degree. I'm doing that a little bit after the fact, but I think there's something about, there's like, just kind of that natural kind of like, chance encounter beauty that is New York City, where these, that you feel like you're just lucky to just catch it. You know what I mean? It's almost like that feeling of just like picking up your camera and grabbing it for a moment because it's really fleeting and it's going to be gone moments later. And that's kind of an aspect of what was happening. So I think ultimately, both from a story and logistical standpoint, it's something that worked for us.
Okay. So you have a passion for telling stories, about individuals and communities overlooked and underrepresented. Well, this is really important, of course, by all means. But why is this important to you?
Well, it's something that, again, it's I discovered that about myself in the sense that, when I started writing, I would just sit down and just write. Like and so many times I would like, write a sentence or write a paragraph or write a page and like, man, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Let me just, and just kind of hop around. But like after a while, when you write, a bunch of things and you look back at what you tend to just naturally gravitate toward, you start to get a better sense of like who you are as a storyteller and what you're interested in. And for me, that the kind of like the way I describe it best, and I think because it encompasses a lot of different things, but like, oftentimes the stories focus on kind of like the the brash, daring, charming, maybe handsome or beautiful individual that's like the person that rises to the cream of the crop. I'm kind of often interested in the person that's standing behind that person, maybe the person that's kind of getting lost in the back of the room. Like I'm kind of interested in what's going on in that person's brain, and in their experience. And that's kind of like the jump off point, I guess. That does end up encompassing maybe certain characters or communities that we haven't traditionally seen on screen, but that's kind of where I think it comes from.
Okay. So communication is the ultimate theme of this movie, as the two people collectively overcome communicative and social engagement. You have said, I quote, ultimately, feeling through is about the power of human connection despite whatever differences we may have. Is it also about making the right choice? Derek, who is at the core of this story, does exactly that. He's always facing this dilemma, and he always makes, at the end, the right choice.
Yeah, for Tariq, the two character Tariq that you're mentioning, for him, it's like a coming of age moment for him as a young man. I think it's something, ultimately, he's in a really challenging situation himself, and he's not really equipped with the tools to maybe properly deal with it. But something that he really realizes through his experience with Artie, is that, you know, he learns to really let his guard down and open his heart and connect with someone in Artie, and that's meant to evoke this feeling that he's now better equipped, having gained the ability to do that, and having made that earnest, heartfelt connection with another person, that he's now better equipped to deal with his own problems, even though he's facing the same problems at the very end.
Yes.
It's meant to having gone through that experience with that person has left him in a better situation to deal with the same problems he had. So that was like a really big kind of driving force behind, you know, what we're trying to display in this film.
Okay, developing your story ideas. Is there, or better, or to put it better, what is your developmental process, if you like?
You know, for me, it's a bit of a sloppy one, but
Okay.
I say that with a smile, because for
As
me,
I say for myself, a creative confusion.
yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of that. You know, for me, I do my best to especially when an idea is fresh, or I'm trying to find an you know, what I want to spend my time with. For me, it's a really intuitive process, or at least I try to make it as intuitive as possible. But that means plenty of false starts, or plenty of days where I feel like I'm not getting it yet or figuring it out. But I try to be patient with myself. I mean, there's a lot of different you know, the context in which you're developing something is really important. You can't separate the two, right? Because the person that's sitting alone in the room trying to come up with the thing that they want to tell is very different than the person who's you know, managers like, you know, I need 3 things to be able to take you out into all these rooms with by this date, or else like this isn't going to work, versus the person that, like, you know, has a deal with a studio where they have to deliver X amount of projects over Y amount of years, right? The context in which you're developing something has such an effect on the development process. In my case, like, I honestly, what I love more than anything is being in as much of a vacuum as I can, figuring out the thing that I want to tell, and then taking that to people when I'm ready to do so. And, you know, that's like a luxury, but also something where I probably, you know, missed out on opportunities by doing it that way. But yeah, because ultimately, to me, storytelling as the, you know, storytelling is a crucial act. You know, I'm one of those people who, not to sound cheesy or to sound like I'm, you know, over glamorized or over putting more undue importance on it. I really do think it's a vital aspect of how we live our lives. Like, I do think back to how, like, where storytelling came from, like when we were like early humans, you know, trying to tell each other life lessons that were important for survival. Like, it has that kind of function. I know, you know, it's changed a lot with you know, it being kind of like popcorn entertainment too, and I'm not against that, but by any means, but I do think it does have a vital function. So for me, ideally, when I'm developing a story, I'm spending a lot of time checking in with myself and my intuition to feel into where I think will be a great use of my time, where I'll learn something from it and be able to share something with other people that'll have value to them. I want it to be something that has value. Now, value is something that can mean a lot of different things, but I do want it to be something that has value. I don't want it to be something that someone just puts on in the background to pass a little bit of time. So yeah, I mean, it can be a slow and kind of like, you know, circuitous process, but I try to spend as much time as I can just checking in with myself to see what's you know, registering, and then from there, there's a little bit more structure to like starting to get out different drafts of it. But that's the first step, is the most important to me.
Okay. So that brings me to the next question. It has to do with something that Tarkovsky has said. The meaning and depth of a director's work are valued based on what pushes him to make a film. The decisive factor is the motive. The way he shoots and method come as symptoms. Do you agree with that idea?
Yeah, I think that's really well put. You know, I do think that I think you know, filmmaking's challenging because it's an art form where there's so many people involved with it, and there's money is such a big thing, right? Like you can be a painter and
Unfortunately,
probably, you know, afford to like have the paint and the brushes and the canvas you need to like execute the thing exactly as you want to in a vacuum. But with film, you know, you're sometimes beholden to investors or, you know, studio executives and all these other things. And but I do agree with that, like it's that inspiration moment, whether it be this fleeting image or just this feeling. That's the thing that if you can do your best to continue to kind of like honor that and see that through and let that be the guiding force, I think you're going to get something that is going to be special for people. You know, sometimes people might not realize why, but they're like, they might even say, like, I can't put my finger on it, but like, there's just something that like every time that movie's on, I got to watch it. You know, like, or there's just something, you know what I mean? I think that's that thing. I think it's things that are made, films that are made where someone's really like honored that feeling that inspired it in the first place and really tried to stick with that throughout the whole process.
yeah, I was just rolling down. I want to see some information from your film. That's why I'm doing this. Let's talk a little bit about the great masters. I mean, your influences. Who's your, you know, your the director that influenced you the most?
Yeah, that's it. You know, I get that, definitely asked that question often. And you know, kind of push comes to shove, there's like certainly names I can mention, but like my genuine feeling. I know there's certain people that like have a director or several directors that are like they kind of like they're number one, number two, number three, and then that very consciously informs their work. For me, like I feel like most things that I see inform my work. Like I'm never thinking about any kind of like one director or like any that is informing. And I think like I'm kind of always taking aspects of anything that I see that might spark a curiosity or kind of a new way to do something. um so yeah, I mean, like, I mean, there's certainly directors whose films I tend to love more than others. That's for sure. You know, I know Jordan, like, and they're not even directors that necessarily influence my work that much. Like Jordan Peele, for instance, whose movie Nope, his new film just came out this weekend, which I'm excited to see. I think he's a genius and brilliant. But he works narratively and genre in a way that's very different from what I do and doesn't necessarily have a.
Doug, which movie have you watched the most in your life?
I think it's probably I think it's got to be The Shawshank Redemption. I think I've seen that movie because I remember you know, back, you know, I'm in my late 30s, so like I didn't, you know, growing up, you know, we didn't have all the streamers where you could like just watch any movie that you wanted at any point. And Shawshank Redemption was a movie that was on TV all the time. So I remember just seeing it like in you know on VHS, you know, or maybe DVD later on, but certainly on TV like all the time. And that is one of those movies where I loved watching it over and over again. And it didn't matter what if it was on TV, it didn't matter like what point in the story it was. I was like down to pick it up from wherever it was. So I'd say that that was a movie that I probably watched the most and love still to this day. Like there's so many things about it that are just not just the nostalgia, but you know the performances and the heart in it is really still
Well,
resonates.
it's a masterpiece, isn't it? Uh, well, the movie I watched the most is The Big Lebowski. This
Like
is the
it's up there for me too. Me and my brother were obsessed.
over 1,000 times, I
Yeah,
think.
I
I,
remember, you know, I didn't know when I went to see it in the theaters when it had just come out, and it was like it got a pretty small release, and I didn't know anything about it going into it. And I remember that was one of my favorite theater going experiences. I was so pleasantly surprised with what it was, and yeah, I've watched it like, you know, a million times since
what
then.
about your future plans? What are you planning to do
Yeah.
next?
Well, there's a couple things that I'm working on right now, but actually something that's very related to this conversation that we are excited to share at some point next year. You know, as I was mentioning earlier in this conversation, feeling through is something that we hadn't just been, you know, we've of course been exhibiting in traditional ways, like at film festivals and, you know, distributing the film in traditional ways, but we've also been using it to create conversation and to create experiences and platforms for individuals who are deafblind and disabled to share their experiences. And I'm excited to say that we are working on and a good ways into creating a platform that we're calling Feeling Through Studio, which is basically a one-stop shop for a ton of content with individuals who are disabled sharing their experience. So it's kind of like, you know, the best reference point that most people are familiar with, but I'm not sure if you are, the website called Masterclass. Are you familiar
Yes,
with
I know
that?
it. I used to be to watch some, you know, some Scorsese lectures.
Right. There's lots of like famous directors on there, but people of all disciplines. It's kind of, this platform will be organized fairly similarly, but it'll be very different in nature. But it'll feature, you know, 2 camera interviews with a number of people who are disabled talking on a lot of pertinent topics, but also roundtable discussions with multiple people talking about a topic. And lastly, a lot of like verite short documentaries following different people through different experiences, that will help extrapolate certain, you know, the learning about certain topics. So we're really excited to launch this multifaceted platform that we hope will not only be interesting for people, but will be something that people can go to learn, whether it be an individual or also how we've been using the film in schools with organizations, and in all these different spaces to have it be an interactive or engaging, immersive, and storytelling approach to learning about things that are really important topics pertaining to the disability community that, quite frankly, not enough people know enough about yet.
Okay, that's very promising. Let's talk about the way you worked with Mr. Robert Tarango. Do I pronounce it correctly?
Hmm?
This is a deaf-blind man. So this is, I think, this was the first time in the film history that we have an actor which is both deaf and blind performing a role. We know how demanding and difficult is the actor-director relationship, and there are different techniques, methods. We know acting is a process, but all this in a very, you know, ideal place. How difficult it was for you to work with Robert and to have this outcome. I mean, the performance was astonishing from both actors, of course, but you know, our interest lies with Robert here.
Yeah, you know, well, first, just to qualify something, Robert is the first deafblind actor to star in a film. Helen Keller herself actually appeared in a film about her life. She was it was like a 3-part film that covered 3 eras of her life, and she was in the 3rd part of it. So there were other actors playing her earlier in the film. She comes in toward the end to play like herself as an older person. So to just add that into, you know, film history there, Helen Keller did appear in a film about her life. But yeah, Robert, you know, it was awesome for it to be this groundbreaking thing with Robert. But you know, the process was really, look, I mean, I had partnered and I'd collaborated with the Helen Keller National Center to make this film because I knew I wanted to have that support throughout and have people who knew a lot more than I did and be able to rely on other people. Helen Keller National Center is an organization that's based in New York. That's a national organization here in the United States that is really one of the most foremost institutions for individuals who are deafblind to get the life skills training they need to live independent and fruitful lives. And you know, in working with them, and really getting to know the community for quite a while before we made the film was a really great education that I needed to be able to even start to approach this in the best possible way. But you know, I had a great team. You know, I had interpreters who helped facilitate the conversations between Robert and I got to know Robert pretty well before we started filming. But yeah, there were different approaches I had to take. You know, I'd say like in my previous experience, you know, the way in which I like to kind of talk to actors is maybe more. I don't like to hit the nail on the head too much. I like to kind of like speak maybe more poetically or figuratively. But I realized that that was something that wasn't necessarily easy to interpret to ASL. So like I spoke more directly to Robert in a way that I learned a lot from as a director. So yeah, there were like certain nuances like that as far as like how I communicated was different. And of course, communicating through interpreters is a different process. You know, we also employed touch techniques, you know, just basic touch techniques on Robert's back or shoulder to just kind of give him relay very quick and specific information to him to just make sure that we were able to move, you know, pretty quickly on set. But you know, it was hard, but like I feel like it's always hard as I feel like every film is hard. So this was certainly new and different challenges, but it was hard and also ultimately in the way that any film is hard. And there's so much that I gained from the experience in learning from Robert and learning from the way in which we interacted and learning more about him and his experience that was such a hugely amazing takeaway from this experience.
Okay. We are wrapping it. We are wrapping it up as we speak. Just want to go through the critique I have written for your work just after it won the award at our festival. I would just leave out the first paragraph which we have more or less described it. And I'm going to the last lines, which is an emotionally charged story with a delicate touch of comic discharges. At points, very delicate, is a modern Joycean smelling drama. It was for me, describing how the universal inherent to the human nature need for communication can overcome all barriers, bringing us close to each other in our moments of vulnerability, reminding me the words of the Greek poet Livaditis, who says, when one does not die for the other, then we are already dead. Do you agree with this description?
Yeah, I loved it. I really I wrote to you after you shared that with me because I thought it was such a really beautiful and insightful way to describe it and take away from it. I think it's great. I think it's really accurate and I really appreciate it. You know, I think, you know, when you're a filmmaker and you make a film and you let it out into the world, it's not really entirely yours anymore, right? It's kind of everyone's who it becomes everyone else's in a way. And that's great. You get to hear the, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between, and that's part of the experience. But there is something particularly nice when people really feel like they're getting the nuances that you were hoping would come across, and I think that you captured that really beautifully, and I really appreciate that.
You know what they say, a true work of art is universal.
Yes, I agree.
Whatever that means, I know what it means because I have my major in my master's degree is on philosophy of art. So I do believe, I accept that there is, you know, a true work of art, and not all things are art, can be called art. So a true work of art is a universal language. So this means that you have succeeded in delivering such a work of art. If one of art's purposes is to describe our place in the universe, Roland provided us a spot on our existential map of consciousness. I think that was the icing on the cake.
I think I have to frame your response
It
to
would be an honor. It would be an honor. Just before the end of the film, Artie tells Tariq, "You will be okay," putting things into perspective for all of us. I mean, suddenly, you know, Artie's problems were not so, you know, so important anymore. And we hear this man says to him, a young boy with, having all the future in front of him, you'll be okay. Are we going to be okay, Doug?
Man, that's a good question. I'll answer that first by saying it was really interesting. This film was made prior to the pandemic, but it was really an interesting film to be showing and premiering and showing during the pandemic, really. You know, you line up and ask many different people that question, you'll get a lot of different responses. I'm more in the camp of thinking that, one way or another we will be okay, but I don't think that means everything's easy peasy and that we're just gonna be able to skip through beautiful fields, sun-kissed fields all the time. But I think ultimately, people are really adaptable. We sometimes have to get really coaxed into something to change, but I think we'll continue to change and evolve in the ways that we need to respond to all that's happening now and anything else that's to come. So I tend to err on the side of the fact that we'll be okay one way or another, but that's a general statement. I don't want that. I don't, on an individual level, I know everyone has their own experience. Some people, their lives, are more challenging than others. But I think speaking from a bird's eye view, macro standpoint, I think we'll be okay.
Doug, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. And once more, congratulations on your award. And my team and I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. Thank you for having Feeling Through in the festival and for honoring it in the way that you did and sharing the beautiful words you did. And the only thing I have to say is I'm remiss that I wasn't able to be there in person. And next time I'm in Greece, we'll have to share a meal together.
Okay, I am looking forward to it. So